Hi all, welcome to another session on adaptive cards. In this video, we will see how we can get to work with the basics of an adaptive card and at the same time how to send an adaptive card to Microsoft Teams from Power Automate. Now, adaptive cards are platform agnostic and they are JSON snippets which can be authored by the developers and can be used across apps and services. When delivered to a specific app, the JSON is transformed into the native UI that automatically adapts to its surroundings. Now, the card authors can describe their content as JSON object and use it to display data or take input from end users using the card. That content can be rendered natively inside the host application like Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Power Virtual Agents, etc. We will be seeing a business use case of implementing adaptive cards where we have a SharePoint document library that acts as a content repository for procurement invoices. Upon the upload of a new invoice, we would need to intimate the finance controller directly in the Teams chat. And to achieve this, we will use Power Automate and send the notification as an adaptive card to the user's Teams chat. So as to get started, we will create a Power Automate with when a file is created trigger, and we will connect to the library that we are going to use. We will just connect to the SharePoint side and specify the library from which we will be picking the document that Hostling will be sharing with the finance controller as an adaptive card. Now the next step would be to add a adaptive card posting action, which is available as a native action in Power Automate. Now we will be setting the properties as post as flowbot and post in chat with a flowbot, and it will give us more options like who's the recipient. Now say for instance, I'll just give the finance controllers Teams chat. And now we have an option to add the adaptive card here. So this is where we will be adding the JSON that we want to actually display as an adaptive card to the end user within the Teams channel. Now, before we move on to there, we will just head over to the adaptive card designer. The content that needs to show up in the adaptive card has to be written in JSON and added to the adaptive card field, just we saw in Power Automate. Now we can make use of the adaptive card designer, which is available in the adaptivecards.io/designer, which is basically an interactive visualizer that helps us build the JSON for adaptive cards. As we can see, the screen is divided into multiple layouts with the card showing in the center stage where it actually shows like how the card would be rendered. And in the left pane, you can see the controls that we can add to the adaptive card. We have multiple containers that can be added, multiple element blocks that we can be added to the adaptive card. It can also contain some input controls which can be added to the adaptive card. And towards the bottom, we have a card payload editor, which defines the schema that has to show up in the JSON as JSON in the adaptive card. And in case you want to refer to some sample data, you can add it to the sample data editor in the right pane. Say for instance, we can see like there's a JSON with key value pairs, like title is having publish adaptive card schema. Now, if I go ahead and remove it to test, you can see the publish adaptive card schema is shown as a title here. I will just go ahead and remove it to test. It gets reflected directly as in the title of the adaptive card. Now that is because it is being referred here using $title, and whatever values there in the title will be easily referred by the $title here, because that is more like referring to the JSON attribute and showing it in the adaptive card. So for this, sample data editor becomes very handy. But otherwise, if we want to define the structure, we will be entirely working with the card payload editor. Now let's take a look at the overall structure of the card payload editor. It basically has mainly five set of main attributes. The type, which is the root element, defines the adaptive card. It is mainly the root object, which describes the adaptive card itself. Then we have the body attribute, which describes how the body of the adaptive card will look like. It is made up of building blocks known as elements, and elements represents the objects that needs to be shown in the adaptive card, which basically is the same elements you can see in the left pane basically. So the body elements that we see here will actually decide or dictate the look and feel of the adaptive card. And in this example that we have automatically that is shown up in the adaptive card designer, we can see that there are almost like one, two, three, and four body elements that is actually being added. And you can see that each element is described within a curly braces. So the first element is the text blocks element, which you can see the same text block element has been added here. And you can see a set of styling options like how should the text be styled, like with medium and the weight is bolder. And the text by itself is being picked from the sample editor. But in case you want to actually hard code the title, I can actually add the title here and it will just get reflected on the adaptive card. Now, the next you have another element, which is basically a column set, which is shown here. You can see there is a column, one column, two column layout is shown here. And if you want to create a table-like structure, you can use column set container to hold different elements within that columns. So we have added a column set as the next element, and within that we have multiple types. Like one is the image is the another element, which is again placed within the curly braces, and it's of type image. And you can see that we are getting the URL of the image from the sample data card editor. But in case you want to have give a URL directly, you can give it here. And other than that, you have another column. The second column shows the user name and the created date. So you can see that inside the column set, there is and other items like, yeah, again, a text block which shows the creator name, and another text block which shows the created date as the another text block. So that completes the column set. And if you come a bit down, you can see that there is another element, which is again a text block which shows the description. And then again, another element that is towards the end is the fact set. So fact set is mainly used to show key value pairs. You can see that it's an element here with the same container fact set is being used here, which actually shows facts, or facts are basic key value pairs, and we are actually deriving those values from the properties in the properties attribute from this JSON. So you can see that the title and value are actually being picked from here, which are basically a key value pairs, which will be shown in the this particular element. Now, how it would look like, we can just use the preview mode to see how the fact set will look like. You can see that it is shown as a set of key value pairs. Now, finally, we can see a couple of buttons listed here in the adaptive card that is being possible through the actions attribute. And if I just go ahead and I will just minimize the body and expand the actions, we can see that actions again are defined using the action dot show card, or it can be action dot submit. So there are multiple actions that we can actually use. So if I actually head back to the documentation for adaptive cards, you can see there are multiple actions like action.open URL, action.submit, action.showcard that we can use to add some actions, clicking on which some activities will happen within adaptive cards. Now here, action.submit is more like a submit button. Action.open URL is more like it will open a new tab or a new window within the browser. Or action.showcard is if you want to open a new adaptive card by clicking it, we can use the action.showcard. Now, in the native or the default adaptive card that we see here, we can see that clicking on set due date, it opens up a new adaptive card just below it with a couple of fields. So action.showcard, as you can see here, is nothing but clicking on it, we are showing another card or adaptive card by itself. So if you look at the definition for that card, the type is itself is an adaptive card. We have an internal body or a nested body within it. And again, within it, we have nested actions, which shows actually the action.submit. So if I actually go a bit down, you can see like, clicking on it, it actually shows you two fields and another submit button inside. So to build that adaptive card, we are actually using the JSON, creating a card within the action.show card attribute. We can see that this card defines the new card that has to be shown when we click on that button. And same way, like there was another action button called action.open URL, which is clicking on it will show the kind of a pop-up saying that it has been clicked and the corresponding URL is actually shown. Now that is also defined here using the action.open URL attribute. and we can define the title and the URL to be shown here. So that is how we define some actionable activities using the action buttons within the action attribute of the adaptive card. And finally, the remaining two main attributes for the adaptive card is the dollar schema and the version. Now, dollar schema is nothing but the detailed definition of what are the controls and what are the stylings that we can actually use within adaptive card. So use this URL to see like what does the schema look like. We can just go ahead and see like it's a large set of JSON file which defines like what are the attributes that we can use. Like we can use action set, what are its dependent properties, and say for instance you have column container, like what are the properties of the column, and like how can we use it, and what are the styling options that we have for this particular containers or elements. So the entire details are actually given in the JSON. Usually we don't change it, we just use the same URL. And now the version is a bit something that you want to actually be careful of. If you're using it for a Teams chat, making a time of making a video version 1.4 or less is something that works with Teams. Where 1.5 doesn't work, it will actually not render properly in Teams. So you just need to work with something 1.4 or below when you are actually creating an adaptive card for Microsoft Teams. So having said that, the main area that we will actually work on to edit the card is the body section and the action section. And for this demo, we will be creating a very simple adaptive card that shows just two elements. One is the title of the adaptive card, and second is the link to the document that we have uploaded, which will be shown as an adaptive card in Microsoft Teams. So as we can see, like we have moved on to the designer and added the adaptive card JSON that we are going to use. We have just added two text blocks here in the body. There is the first text blocks contains the invoice alert. That is whenever a user is adding an invoice to the document library, we will be triggering the Power Automate and sending the invoice alert to the finance controller as an adaptive card. So the invoice alert is actually shown up as the first element, which is the text. And then just below that, we'll actually be giving a message saying the new procurement invoice has been uploaded in the repository, and you can view the item here. And following, we'll also add a link to this item from Power Automate directly here. And that will sum up our adaptive card that we are going to use for the demo currently. Now, what we will do is like we have used the adaptive card designer to design this particular JSON, and the good thing is we can see in real time how the adaptive card looks like. And we'll just now copy this over to Power Automate, and we'll place it in the adaptive card section. And we'll also update the document link by searching for the link to item so that it will show the link to the document here. Now, this completes the adaptive card that we are trying to actually display to the Microsoft Teams using Power Automate whenever a invoice is uploaded. We'll just quickly go ahead and save it. Now, let's test the implementation by uploading a new invoice to the site. We will just go ahead and upload an invoice. I have uploaded the April 2021 invoice to the document library. Now this should kickstart the Power Automate, and it should send a adaptive card directly to the Microsoft Teams. So we'll just see if the workflow has been triggered, and we can see that the flow has succeeded. We'll just quickly open to see if yeah, we can see the tick mark, and we can see that the adaptive card has been posted as an output to the Microsoft Teams. You can see the status code is 201, which indicates a successful transfer of adaptive card to Microsoft Teams. Let's head over to Microsoft Teams to see if yeah, we have got an adaptive card. As you can see, yes, we have got two elements adaptive card, which shows the header invoice alert followed by the message that invoice has been uploaded along with the link to the uploaded PDF, which indicates a successful adaptive card transfer from Power Automate. Thus, we could see how we can create an adaptive card using the adaptive card designer and use that JSON in Power Automate and send it across as a adaptive card to Microsoft Teams. This is quite handy when it comes to informing users using some user-friendly UI UX experience using adaptive cards becomes one of the primary choice of usage. Now we will see how we can extend this usage of adaptive cards in one of our upcoming videos. So stay tuned and thanks for watching.